In this game, impacts aren't just expected, they're celebrated. That's why premier players choose Q-Collar, the proven shield for their brains. Be ready for the clash. Keep your head protected and in the game.
All right, let's shift away from LSMs. Let's head to defense. And to do it, I'm going to highlight one of those guys that I don't really know where his best fit is at D or at LSM. North of the border, Brandon Kirby Lyons. We saw him with Fusion West. I think he does some of his club ball with Team VC as well. And then I also saw him at Best in Class early in the summer, another guy that kind of popped early. I wrote about him at that point and said that I think that if we were to have tallied all the ground balls up through the entire event, he would have led it. Really an awesome stick and, brings that like level of tenacity and cover defense that you would want. And I think that part of the reason that you could see him at LSM is because of that stick, right? He's really good off the ground. But at the end of the day, like he's a possession ender at close defense. So I think either way you have, a bit of versatility to him in this game. And so that's one of those guys that I think like is a large group that you don't really know if he's going to be a close D or an LSM guy until teams get their hands on him and kind of see where he fits their needs best. But with that kind of like opening the agenda into defense, who wants to kick us off?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like this is my victory lap. I've been on the Joe Lagas train. I feel like I've been the conductor pulling the whistle into oncoming traffic for a year. And the reason it's so vindicating that I know he's going to get a ton of attention on September 1st is because I don't think he is a traditionally valued skill set. I think that for 15 years, when it comes to close to defenders, the overriding thing that college coaches cared about was your ability to match feet. And whether that was a combination of quickness, change direction, on-ball physicality, if you were turning back Dodgers consistently, then that was the player that they wanted the most. And I think that the sport has changed both by virtue of the shot clock and by virtue of how good these offensive players are and how well they protect their sticks and retain the ball, that you use the term possession ender, that has surpassed the ability to turn back Dodgers because everybody is going to get slid to. And so, for me, Joe Lagas, a 6'3 lefty who plays hockey, he's from Northern California, but not the Bay Area. He's from Sacramento, which is not a place where a lot of lacrosse players have come from. The fact that, again, he's the number one defender on a lot of college teams' boards is a reflection of, I think, an acknowledgement of the way in which that's changed, as well as, just how unlikely this kid's path was to be so highly sought after. So, for me, Joe Lagas he'd be my 12-1 call if I were a college coach.
Which is not to say he can't do the other things.
For sure.
He can turn people back. He can create turnovers and everything.
I compare him to Cole Kastner in the way where I felt like Cole Kastner at UVA was at his best when he was playing alongside an elite number one defender. And he was able to produce havoc in the ride. And then really it's the blindside doubles. The back check when the Dodger turns back the other way, get the ball on the ground, and he was just, he averaged like basically 1.5 cost turnovers and 3 ground balls a game as a sophomore at Virginia. And for me, that was when he was at his best, and that's the type of, that'd be the way that I would want to deploy Lagas, as opposed to having him guard the number one of the opponent's number one, because I think it's the best use of him.
Lagas is probably my favorite player in this class. And, maybe it's my hockey player bias in there, but he plays like a hockey player, the way that, you see these high-level hockey players and the way that they can pick up ground balls is really something that's fascinating. Always love a big lefty as well. And Terry, to your point, like, is there a bigger misnomer than number one defender in the sport? It doesn't mean it doesn't mean you are the best defender. He is not going to be a number one in the sense that he's going to cover the top guy, but he's going to be the most important defender to wherever he goes to play college.
It's also a misnomer because no team has the same guy guard the opposing team's best player every week all season long, because the opposing team's best player on some teams is 6'2", 200 pounds, and on other teams is 5'8", 160 pounds, and that athletic profile is enough for a lot of coaches to say, we're going to put this guy on him, and we're going to put this guy on him. If you look at how Notre Dame deployed their defenders last season, It wasn't,
It's not 1-1, 2-2, 3-3.
Sean Light is not guarding the number one on every. I mean, Chris Conlon guarded Brandon O'Neal the first time they played, and I was as certain that Sean Light was going to guard him as I was about anything. And Sean Light is probably like as likely to be the Schmeisser Award winner in 2025 as any player is at any position. Mm-hmm. And so the fact that they still didn't want to deploy him on O'Neal was an indication of exactly the point that we're talking about.
Yes. Another lefty I want to shout out as a guy who's already committed to Army, AJ Theodorkakis.
Just kudos to you for having the courage to say that last name.
I stumbled through a little bit, but AJ just work with us a little bit here. We're big fans of your game, and another guy who's like super physical, is really great on ball, but you can tell he's a menacing force of nature off ball as well, and just you're glued to him as soon as you see him in some of the Sweet Lax games that I've seen throughout the summer. Great stick. He can clear the ball himself, but also kind of orchestrate it and get it up to the middies as well. But it's really his on-ball defense that stuck out most to me. A guy like Kevin Pivath, too. I think you wrote him up at NAL. Typical Malvern Prep defenseman, or what you expect, like a guy who just super menacing from the sideline, just so intimidating to me. He slides hard, and he slides with a lot of force. So, two really physical guys that stood out all summer for me.
I just did my rant about matching feet and guarding the ball as if it doesn't matter, and that's not my point. It does matter. So 3 guys who I saw guard the ball really effectively. Ryan Talbot is a Georgetown Prep next level player who I saw at main stage. And the note that I took, and I sent this to one of the college head coaches that I talked to a lot, was, is this the best player I discovered at this event? Turns out I'd already written him up last year and really, really liked his game. And he's just a mean, low to the ground, really good change direction Georgetown Prep defenseman. Jackson Bond is a guy that we've talked about a lot, not just over the summer, but dating back to the spring. Dan, you did a couple deep dives on Highland Park. But we haven't talked about Noah Hahn yet because we haven't talked about attackmen. And when we do, I'm going to talk about how incredibly athletic and quick I find Noah Hahn to be. And the performance that Jackson Bond put in guarding him in the Countdown Championship was one of the single best matchup performances that I saw all summer. And then the last guy is Wynn Chandler, who is just like a maniac in the best way possible. And so I think he probably fits a little bit of a hybrid between the on-ball and off-ball value in terms of both flying into ground ball scrums as well as eating up space off ball and providing support. But those were 3 guys who, from a physicality standpoint, really stood out to me.
We haven't talked about John Botafuco yet. And, he's a primetime defender, which is one of those, primetime to Notre Dame factory that, is coming out there is pretty remarkable. And just, the way that they coach fits with Notre Dame. Obviously, the connections there between the staff and that club and the history they have there. So, when we talk about guys who can cover someone and erase someone, he's right up there with them.
I saw him playing with Primetime this summer at NAL. They won the championship there. They had a really good summer all year. But he just brought like a level of urgency inside as the hot guy that I thought was really impressive. Made good decisions on that, and like having somebody who's poised and experienced and like, just good inside to understand like, okay, we need to go and we need to get there immediately versus like, let's slow play this and we don't need to jeopardize the team defense here is really important. And I thought that he did a really good job managing those decisions and, like I said, just really, really owned that like inside hot guy role.
Dan, there are 3 guys that are near the top of the class that you can probably speak to better than anybody else in George Kelly, Jaden James, and Flint Leverett. Where do they fit in, and how do you describe their games?
Yeah, all of them are really unique. Jaden James has a bounce to his step that is unlike others, right? Like if Jaden James played midfield, we would use words like glides around the field and like just wins matchups and all that type of stuff. Defensively, though, he uses it in this like stalking manner where he always is out, like always has a stick deep in gloves. You can't run away from him because he just slowly takes the space back, right? Like he stalks you into oblivion, right? And does a really, really good job of that. And then is patient and just waiting and then takes the ball away. Really just a true, take away defender, but he doesn't throw a bunch of junk. He just slowly sits and has a step and then throws one precise, really good check that takes the ball away.
He's also huge, isn't he?
Yeah, he's tall, he's long. I wouldn't say huge. He's I wouldn't say rangy is probably the better word. Huge though is Flint Leverett. Flint Leverett is massive. He first popped onto the scene for me at NHSLS last fall, playing with Culver, and in those instances he was playing LSM. Since then, I've seen him play exclusively close defense. But when he was playing in those LSM spots, like, he showed off a different skill set. And then now seeing him at close, another guy that really embodies that inside hot guy. Does a really good job of making decisions. He's tall, he's long, he's lanky. So when he does go, he really covers ground to get there. And again, really just a strong team first type defender that's pretty good on the cover as well. And then the last guy that Terry threw out was George Kelly. George Kelly's going to be, he is going to go on to be your number one defender that you're talking about. The guy that pretty consistently guards other teams' best players, almost regardless of position or spot on the field. Like, he's just a really, really strong cover defender that has great technique, a righty that just sits, is simple and physical.
Two more guys that I just want to shout out that aren't on the board up there are Bonner Upshaw from Detroit Country Day, Juice Cherries, saw him play against 91 Storm at prime time, and then again with the Midwest at National All-Star. He strikes me as, he's really tall. I think he's probably 6'4", maybe 6'5", and just I can see that there's a lot in his game that is going to develop both as he fills out and gets stronger on that frame, and then also just as he gets more comfortable in terms of a 6-on-6 defensive setting. Like, I could tell at the beginning of the summer that he was playing a little slow, a little tentative, and it felt like just, over the course of 3-4 weeks, I felt him playing faster. And then the other guy was a guy that I took away from that very same game, and it was Jacob Fiedek from North Carolina, who was playing with 91 Long Island. And, he fits into that. Is he at LSM? Is he a close defenseman category? Just came away very impressed by his all-around game.
Dan, another guy that you don't have on this list here, but I think he's definitely going to be on those longer position lists in this class, is Caleb McDowell, a defender out of New Jersey, who I saw him guarding these quicker defenders, these kind of quick, slippery guys, and he just did a really solid job. And every ground ball scrum, he was coming out with the ball, with some pretty good speed, and he just is one of those guys that it felt like his teammates just looked up to him and looked like. There's a sense of reliability that and an aura of confidence that he kind of exuded out there. So I really like him as a guy who's going to take up some quick matchups.
He moves so fluidly, and, at the expense of making an overall geographic comparison. But he does remind me of Mikey Marshall, the LSM going to Cornell, who, was one of the revelations of the U20 tryouts that I went to. And not saying that he's at that level, but it was the type of impact on the game that he made that I, kind of made me think and I'm glad to hear you say it, because it was another one where when I saw him, I was like, how good is he actually? Is this me overreacting to my fondness for his style of play? So there's a lot of, you're kind of, making me feel stronger in my take.
He's 6'2", he's 185, he's tall, he's strong, he's athletic.
That's where the Marshall comparison breaks down. Marshall is not tall.
Right. So I think he fits this athletic profile that a lot of coaches okay, if I want to go find a defender and you just have this blank slate, what would it look like? I think you might be describing a lot of the things that Caleb McDowell brings to the table.
Championships aren't won on the final shot alone. It all starts with the commitment to stay healthy and on the field for your team. Q-Collar, essential brain protection so athletes can chase greatness.